This is The Takeout.
Ask not what your country can do for you.
With Major Garrett.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
At this defining moment, change has come to America.
And we will make America great again.
Welcome to the very best part of my broadcast suite. I'm Major Garrett, host of The Takeout. Let me tell you what's happening right now. We're at Trustee's, a restaurant about 12 blocks from Capitol Hill. It's got a very nice sort of license plate on the walls vibe. It was described to me as divey. I don't think it's divey at all. I just think it's kind of rustic. A lot of burgers on the menu. We'll get to that. It's a Wednesday night. But let me tell you something else that's happening and why my voice at times will be a little hesitant during this show. You see, we have new equipment here at The Takeout. And that new equipment is bedeviling me with a 1-second delay of my voice in my headphones. A 1-second delay of my voice in my headphones. So, at home, try this out. Say something out loud, then say the exact same thing 1 second later and try to have a conversation. That's why I'm a professional, ladies and gentlemen. Our guest, Senator Jeff Merkley. He's not wearing headphones because he doesn't want to hear his voice
exactly
1 second after his. And I'm not going to force him to live with that. Senator Merkley, thank you for being with us. It's a great pleasure to have you at the Takeout Podcast. Thanks for getting the vibe. Thanks for being with us.
You bet. And I should mention that just behind the cameras, Oregon State is up on the wall. They're in the baseball.
And not metaphorically. Oregon
No.
State is actually on the wall.
No.
College World Series is going on. It's a Wednesday night, and this set the drama. There's drama going on right now.
Yes, at this very moment, Oregon State has 3 people on base, first, second, and third. They have only a single out, and so therefore this could be the
and they're
moment.
up 2-1 at the top of the fifth.
They just scored.
And
they
a
just
must-win
scored a
game.
run just as we were starting the broadcast.
Right.
And so I think we're bringing them some good luck here.
Now, of course, Senator, this show lives many different lives. It starts as a podcast Friday morning. That's when we give it to all of our podcast subscribers. It's on CBSN, our digital platform, Saturday and Friday night. And it's on more than 40 radio stations all over the country, all throughout the weekend. So by the time you hear this show, folks, we'll know what happened. But we're living the moment now. So if Oregon State does something really good, this senator from Oregon is going to yell out.
You're going to hear me.
And we're going to be happy with that. All right, Senator, so much to discuss. We have a phrase, we White House correspondents, that's uttered with some regularity. It goes like this. What a long year last week was.
Yes.
There's also a line from 30 Rock, a great sitcom on NBC, in which Lemon goes to Alec Baldwin and says, man, what a week. And Alec Baldwin says, Lemon, it's Wednesday. Okay? That's what I feel like
happening
every week of my life.
Yes.
But this week is, and it's only Wednesday, it's Wednesday night, chock full of stuff. Let's start right at the top of today's huge news event. Anthony Kennedy, Associate Justice, Supreme Court, announces his retirement. Your reaction?
Oh, well, this sends shockwaves through the communities of every citizen who believes in the vision of we the people government. Because already we have a 5-4 court that its rulings consistently favor the privileged and the powerful over ordinary people. And it's really kind of standing the vision of our Constitution on its head. Our Constitution is all about the theme of decisions that reflect the will of the people, by the people, for the people. And instead, we're having government and Supreme Court decisions that reflect government by and for the powerful.
Why does Anthony Kennedy's retirement make that a bigger and, as you just said, shockwave type episode? Why?
There are so many issues that have been 5-4 related to gerrymandering, related to voter suppression and voting rights in general, related to money, billionaires' money contaminating our political system, women's rights and workers' rights and consumer rights, all impacted by this 5-4 court. And having a younger justice replace Kennedy means that we're looking at an impact that could last a generation.
And Kennedy, I assume, from your perspective, Senator Merkley, was not a reliable vote on your side of the constitutional orientation, but he occasionally was a moderating voice on the court. Would that be a fair way of describing it from your vantage point?
Absolutely. Very, very occasionally, not often enough, but for example,
people mistake it like he's some kind of raging moderate. He probably isn't in the grand scheme of things on the court, but he occasionally was decisive on the other side.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
And your
exactly
fear
right.
is that a younger, maybe more constitutionally ground. Now, you have to choose your words here so carefully because everyone wants to own what these words mean.
Yes.
There's this idea of strict constructionist, originalist, all these sorts of words that are freighted with meaning. But you're afraid, if I hear you correctly, that someone who's younger, who is of, let's say, an Antonin Scalia or Neil Gorsuch frame of mind on these constitutional questions, that could be injurious to the interests of either working people, women, or other minorities in this country.
Well, absolutely damaging. And certainly the Constitution was framed with a vision that fits very well with government of, by, and for the people. I mean, that was its goal. They didn't want to replicate government by and for the powerful and privileged that they had in many European countries. As Jefferson put it, the mother principle of our Constitution was that power would be distributed so evenly among the voting citizens that he called it the equal voice principle. He said that's the mother principle, and if you don't have that, you will not get decisions that reflect the will of the people. And so here we are now with a court that routinely does not reflect the will of the people. It reflects what helps out the privileged and the powerful. So our Constitution is being shredded by this court, and this retirement creates an opportunity for those who don't believe in the vision of our Constitution to lock in an anti-American majority for a long time to come.
An anti-American majority.
Anti-American majority, that's right.
That's what you think is at stake.
That's what's at stake, yes.
Now, you and I could really delve almost endlessly into Article 1, Article 2, Article 3 powers in the Constitution. Yes. But let's just talk about your job as a legislator. The court often says we'd much rather take our cues from the legislative body. Legislatures can and should act, and then we are required to step in. But I don't need to tell you, many of these issues now get stuck in the legislative branch and then redound to the high court. Why can't legislators do their job better?
Well, I'll tell you,
and make the Supreme Court and the specter of this that you're talking about less powerful.
Yeah, I am extremely frustrated at how paralyzed our Congress is. I first came here as an intern for Senator Hatfield from Oregon. And
Mark Hatfield, a Republican,
Mark Hatfield,
who when
yes.
I first started covering Congress was the ranking Republican on the Appropriations Committee.
That's right. There was a moment
when
Packwood from Oregon was head of the Tax Committee. And,
right, the Finance Committee.
And you had Hatfield as head of the Spending Committee, so therefore Oregon was
the
in the
fulcrum
seat.
of power in the Senate.
It was for a little while, but it's been a long time since. But at that time, if you followed what happened on the floor of the Senate, the majority leader of neither party would proceed to block amendments. So you'd have any person getting the attention of the chair could put up an amendment on any topic. It would be debated. It would be voted on. They were generally germane. And as soon as it was done, it opened up the opportunity for another amendment. Nothing like that exists now. One thing the press has totally missed is that in 2017, outside of the budget process, not a single amendment was debated on the floor of the Senate.
Right.
That's how dysfunctional the Senate's become.
Right. That's how majoritarian the Senate has become. It's become much more like the House of Representatives, though not by its formal rules, but by its inclinations and practices. It seems to me. I started covering the United States Congress in 1990, back when both chambers legitimately saw themselves as completely different. The Senate rules were the Senate rules, the House rules were the House rules, and neither wanted either to look like each other. It seems to me, and I'm an outsider, I'm not there every day, I'm not in the cloakroom, but the Senate looks and acts more like the House than it ever has before.
Well, if the House wasn't as paralyzed back 4 decades ago as it is now as well, and the Hastert rule, which is a decision by a Republican speaker to not put up anything that wasn't going to have the majority the Republicans supported.
Majority of the majority.
Has really changed the character of the House. And on the Senate side, the practice of routinely making every decision a supermajority decision has completely transformed the Senate. That was reserved for big issues of civil rights, and so it was a privilege to have everyone weigh in until everyone was heard before a vote was taken. That privilege has been converted into a complete change of the character of the Senate.
Now, those of you in the audience who are saying to yourself right now, Major, stop nerding out on process, will you? Brother, you're killing us, all right? You're just killing us. I can't help myself, people. I can't help myself. I cover the White House, but I love Congress. It's the greatest beat I ever covered. So I get a little nerdy about it. I promise, it's over. End of the first segment. Alex, our super intern, who is keeping the time clock, will also take our orders on the other side. We're at Trustees near Capitol Hill. Senator Jeff Merkley, Democrat, Oregon, is our special guest. I'm Major Garrett, back with my voice ringing in my ears in a second.
From 2014 forward, they have been the puppet masters of the Senate. When they tell Mitch McConnell to jump, he says, how high?
You're listening to The Takeout.
I'm Major Garrett, host and creator of this magnificent show. Jeff Merkley, senator from Oregon, Democrat, is our very special guest. Episode 75. Did you ever think we'd get that far, CBSN and radio audience? Probably not, but here we are. Isn't it grand? Okay, I said Alex. I meant Jake. Super intern Jake has got the time clock and will take our order. So, Jake, my brother, get me a double burger with cheese, pepper jack, and cheddar. There we go. Medium plus. Not medium well, medium plus. Loyal listeners know that medium plus is right in between medium well and medium. Now you know, Mr.
I'll
Senator.
take just the straight trustee burger, and with chips, and because unfortunately no fries here, but also a Budweiser, please. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. So, there's now a vacancy on the court. The last time there was a vacancy, I don't need to tell you, Republicans said, whoa. We got to let the voters decide on the presidency. Mitch McConnell said today, we got to fill this right away. The president said, I'm going to choose immediately. What will and what can Senate Democrats do about this vacancy and this debate that's coming?
Well, right now, with John McCain not present on the floor, as you know, he's battling cancer, and we're all wishing him the very, very best. But you essentially have a 50-49 Senate, which means we certainly have a possibility of
a 50-49 Republican
majority. That's right, and if that becomes completely unified, then it'll be a challenge. But we want
procedurally, it's very difficult. You're warning those Democrats out there who are hoping you'll say something that's of salvation.
Yes.
There's no salvation.
Yes, to everyone who's hoping. We're going to use every strategy we can to try to insist that a nominee only gets confirmed if the nominee believes in the we the people vision of our Constitution. And unfortunately, nobody on the Federalist Society's list seems to have that point of view.
You mentioned the Federalist Society, a brief interlude, because one of the things we love to do on this show, Senator, is, if not demystify Washington, at least explain some things that people hear about. Well, we Washingtonians assume they know, but they may not know. So I'll give a 15-second summary of the Federalist Society. Been around almost 30 years. Leonard Leo is one of its top most visible representatives. It has spent 30 years recruiting and talking about this sort of strict constructionist approach to the Constitution. And it has, by this White House's decision, been sort of subcontracted out as the arbiter of those who should be selected for the Supreme Court. Is that I'm not casting aspersions. I think that's just a fair appraisal.
No, absolutely. President Trump has basically said, I'll put up who you tell me to put up.
And why does that concern you?
Well, it concerns me.
I know if Leonard Leo were sitting here, he'd say, what's the problem? These people believe in the Constitution. They believe
I'm not
in the
sure
rule
they
of
do.
law. They believe in our interpretation of what the Constitution originally meant.
Yeah, well, not so. And that's where this fundamental understanding of the Constitution, it's in the first three words, we the people. The whole emphasis on distribution of power. Let's just take Citizens United, for example. This is a Supreme Court case, 5-4, that is the exact opposite of how our Constitution was designed. Jefferson said you need to have an equal voice between the citizens. But the 5-4 Citizens United decision said that billionaires can spend hundreds of millions of dollars in campaigns. And the result is, from 2014 forward, they have been the puppet masters of the Senate. When they tell Mitch McConnell to jump, he says, how high? We have a profoundly corrupted political process. And it's just
that money has no
right
influence on Democrats.
Well, that money certainly has put the Republicans who in charge, and they answer to the Koch brothers. If you want to see just one example of the corruption, think of the difference between 20 years ago when you had environmentalist Republicans and now you don't have a 1. What a change.
And do you think that's driven by money?
Do I think it's true?
Driven by money.
Oh, absolutely. If you've seen what's happened, even those who were speaking out about climate chaos, and we had Republican presidents who wanted to take this on, we had current members of the Senate who wanted to take it on, but once the Koch brothers in 2014 decided to invest hundreds of millions of dollars, and remember, these are the fossil fuel barons. Once they said they are going to finance the Republicans to power, the Republicans stopped talking about the environment. They stopped talking about the climate chaos that is endangering our planet.
Now, there are members of my audience, Senator, who would say, well, what about Tom Steyer? Or what about George Soros? So isn't there big money on the left? And don't they have a say? And isn't that part of this equation, too? And might it not equal out in the grand scheme of things?
Yeah, it doesn't equal out. No, nobody has the kind of money the Koch brothers. Remember, in one single year, their personal wealth went up $10 billion. Try to find someone like that on the left. They're putting in massive amounts way beyond what anyone else is. And here's the point, that Citizens United was a wrong decision. It is the contrary. It is the opposite.
Arkansas just scored. It's 2-2.
I think this is not good news. No,
Bottom of the
2-2. We were up 2-1.
In a must-win game for Oregon State. We're going to keep our eyes sharply peeled on that flat screen just over our CBSN cameras. Hello, CBSN.
Only one out, and Arkansas has folks on first and second. That's not good.
Yes, because when you had bases loaded, Oregon State did not get that.
No, they didn't.
Really essential hit.
3 left stranded.
I know. Lots of runners stranded. LOB, left on base. It's a sorry stat in baseball. So you've laid the predicate. You've explained that there are very few things procedurally Senate Democrats can do. Now, you were on the Senate floor for almost 14 hours, 15 hours on Neil Gorsuch?
15 hours, and I think it was 25
A true filibuster.
Minutes.
Or something approximating a true filibuster,
yes,
a vocal filibuster.
Yes, what I was speaking to throughout that 15 hours and some 25 minutes was, and I tell you at that point, those 25 minutes, you feel them, was we needed the leadership of both sides to come together and not complete the theft of a Supreme Court seat. What happened in 2016 is the Koch brothers commanded Mitch McConnell to not proceed to have a debate or a vote
on Merrick Garland.
On anyone.
On anyone.
This
he
was
said
just
that even
hours
before President Obama nominated Merrick
hours
Garland.
After Antonin Scalia
right.
has passed away from a heart attack. Just hours. And the reason was to take that empty seat and push it forward into the next presidency to try to basically pack the court from the right. And I was saying that if this happens, it so profoundly damages the integrity of the Senate, and that's because we didn't proceed to debate and vote, which has never happened before in U.S. history. 15 times previously, there's been a vacancy during an election year, a presidential election year. We always debated, we always voted. And in addition, it damaged the legitimacy of the Supreme Court because all these 5-4 decisions now have...
From your point of view, are tainted.
Yes, this seat is tainted. The ninth justice is tainted.
Let me play
Neil Gorsuch, if he was principled, he would not have accepted a nomination to a stolen seat.
Let's play the devil's advocate argument. You say we the people. Constitution says we the people. Mitch McConnell would say if he were sitting here, because I know I've talked to him about this, hey, we put this in the hands of the electorate for the presidential election. We said, decide. He knew he was taking a risk because the time he said that, it was not clear who the Republican nominee was, and Hillary Clinton had to have been assumed to be at least a partial odds-on favorite. The question was laid before the country. President Trump won. Isn't that a we the people moment?
Well,
on this question?
No, to be able to take a seat, there's no clause in the Constitution that says in the 4th year of a presidency, the responsibilities of the Senate disappear.
Disappear, right.
And
the advisory
every
consent
Senate leader has
always
honored that responsibility. They took an oath of office, and they violated it.
Okay. We have 30 seconds. Are you going to run for president in 2020?
Well, I'm really focused completely on the issue of the 2018 Senate elections. Just think of what a difference
But
it
you're
would
not
make.
ruling it out. You've publicly not ruled it out.
No, I'm not ruling it out.
You will entertain it.
I will explore it and down the road when the time's appropriate wrestle with that question. But
That's
right now
great.
the time's appropriate to absolutely immerse ourselves in the question of how do you get 51 senators so we don't have another Betsy DeVos who wants to destroy public education, so we don't have another packing of the court.
That's the voice of Jeff Merkley, Democrat from Oregon. We're watching the Oregon State-Arkansas game on the flat screen. It'll long be over by the time this show is broadcast. I'm Major Garrett. That was the second segment of the Takeout. Segment 3 coming up in just a second.
The idea of mistreating children who are from families seeking asylum, fleeing persecution, is about as un-American as it can get.
You're listening to The Takeout.
Thank you, Stephen Portnoy, my good friend, CBS News Radio. CBS Radio News, but how will we ever say that now? Stephen, thank you. Jeff Merkley, Democrat from Oregon, is our special guest. We went to the break talking about whether you're going to run for president. What could stop you from running for president?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm so focused right now on the Senate races here in 2018 that...
Will Democrats retake the Senate?
There is a path to doing it. It is a difficult path. You have to have 26 Democratic seats held, and when you realize there's only 35 seats up, that's be quite extraordinary.
That's
And
some hard math.
Yeah, and then the Democrats would have to take two more. The Democrats would have to take 2 more seats, so that's 28 out of 35. That'd be win 80% of the races. Is it possible? Yes, because we have strong incumbents in all 10 of the seats where Trump won the state. And then in addition, there are at least 3 states and maybe an exciting additional state to add.
Name it.
Well, so listen, it's first of all, let's talk Nevada and Arizona, 1 and 2. And then we have the former governor, Bredesen, running in Tennessee.
Bill Bredesen, former mayor
And
of
then
Nashville.
the issue
And
that
governor.
every single young person in America brings up is whether Beto O'Rourke can create a blue wave in Texas.
Against Ted Cruz.
Against Ted
What do
Cruz.
you think?
Well, I think it's possible. This is not from the point of view of analysis, but the what has really locked up Texas as a red state has been voter suppression. So you need a massive, enthusiastic base of folks to turn out who haven't turned out previously. And if that
And
happens,
massive registration.
a massive registration and turnout.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. We're at Trustee's. Our food has arrived. Your burger looks great. I can guarantee you my double cheeseburger is amazing. The bad news is Arkansas just went up 3-2 on Oregon State, so we're going to try to keep track of that as we also talk. All right, put your headphones on for a second because you're going to listen to something that you did and said, and then I'm going to have you take them off so you don't have to listen to yourself on the 1-second delay like I keep having to, which is, in addition to the 17 other voices in my head, quite a mixture. All right, Jamie, please for us play SOT number 4.
I think they've said no, and I guess the supervisor's in no rush to come out here and talk to me because they do not want members of Congress seeing what's going on inside. They don't want the public to see what's going on inside. They are doing a policy, they themselves, the administration itself, is reported to have wrestled with this from the time that Trump came into office.
Okay, that's the voice of Senator Jeff Merkley. Take your headphones off so you can have a normal conversation. I'll have the abnormal conversation. That was on Facebook Live at your direction. You were in Brownsville, Texas. The inside was a detention center. Take it from there.
Yes, so I'm at the doors of a former Walmart. I've been told that there were hundreds of children inside, possibly as many as 1,000, which I said, and even as I was saying it, I was thinking, that's not possible that they have 1,000 children locked up in this building. They wouldn't let me into the building. I had applied through the normal channels. I'd asked for a waiver because they have a policy designed to make it very difficult for members of Congress to visit. They require 2 weeks in advance, and then they don't guarantee that they'll even say yes. So they've got a veil of secrecy around these detention facilities for children.
Even for members of Congress who are empowered to exercise oversight responsibilities.
Exactly. They're making it very hard for members of Congress to visit. Now, after I drew a lot of, because they not only did they not let me in, but they proceeded to say that the supervisor would come out and talk to me. I said, that's great. That's equivalent to an invitation to being here. I appreciate that. And maybe I can talk the supervisor into giving me a tour when he comes out. He's got a lot of staff here, so why can't he spare one person to give a member of Congress a tour? But what happened was instead they called the police. And so police cars started arriving, and then the supervisor came out, not to talk to me, but to talk to the police. Hadn't asked me to leave the property, but he did ask the police to escort me off the grounds.
So you didn't see inside?
No, so I didn't get inside.
What did you learn anything about what actually was inside?
Well, I've learned a lot since. I went back down 2 weeks later on Father's Day, and I took 6 members of Congress with me. And funny thing, the waiver was granted, and we got inside. And by the way, because I had made an issue out of it, the press had gotten inside as well. So when I thought that it couldn't possibly be true that 1,000 kids were locked up inside, it turned out that almost 1,500 kids were locked up inside that building. And these are older kids, 10 through 17 years old. And this massive surge, because earlier in the year they only had 300 kids. And then 2 months earlier in April they had 500 kids. And suddenly it's June, near the end of June, and they have almost 1,500 kids. So this is a result of the administration proceeding to say that they are going to tear children away from their parents when that family is fleeing persecution and seeking asylum in the United States of America. And that's what America has blown up about, because the idea of mistreating children who are from families seeking asylum, fleeing persecution, is about as un-American as it can get.
Do you believe there's any fraud, as the administration asserts there is? They say widespread fraud in the application process for asylum in this country.
Well, so when you apply for asylum, you're given a court date, and you have to prove your case. Now, many people fleeing persecution, they can't get records from back home. They don't have news reports of what happened, and they aren't able to prove their case. And so 4 out of 5 are not granted asylum at the asylum hearings. That doesn't mean it was fraud. It does mean that they don't have the documentation to prove a credible fear.
But from your point of view, they should at least have the due process.
Absolutely, and to be treated with respect in the process. Lady Liberty has spoken to the world, holding her torch to light the way for those storm-tossed folks tossed up here in America. And the principle has been, send us your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free. And instead, now, that inscription is being changed by the Trump administration. They're saying, if you're fleeing persecution from around the world and you wash up on our shores, we will greet you with a pair of handcuffs, we will throw you in prison, and we will take away your children. That is not the America we know.
Is the family separation issue, from your perspective, a new issue or a more magnified issue because of the zero tolerance policy? Because statistics tell us that other families were separated before, under the Bush administration, under the Obama administration, but just not at the magnitude. Is this a question of magnitude or origination?
Well, it really is a new policy. There were cases in the past when it wasn't clear if a parent was the parent or there was an indication a child was at risk. So that was a very specific and limited situation. Now we're talking about, we know that they're the parent, we know that the children are not at risk, but we're going to separate them anyway. And the administration has said there's 2 reasons for this. One is they want to send a message to the world. So knowing that this does inflict enormous trauma on children, they decided to do it anyway. So to be a deterrent. Not just some, we're talking the Attorney General saying this. That was the heart of their argument. And then the President applauded this and said, this gives me legislative leverage. To think that you're abusing children to get legislative leverage, listen, there's no moral code, there is no religious tradition in the world that allows you to abuse children. And certainly it's an evil and dark thing to do it in pursuit of legislative leverage.
The other thing they say is that there are smugglers involved here and that some of the children are caught in this smuggling network.
Well, you know, it was fascinating to say we're protecting children from smugglers. Well, that's a problem as they're trying to get to the United States. But when they've safely arrived with their parents, that's no longer the issue. They're now here. They've reached home base. They are safe. And yet that argument is being put forward.
You would say prime evidence that they're not being smuggled anymore.
Exactly. That's right. They made it. They made it.
And then therefore, when you hear, we have 30 seconds to go, when you hear the president say, I don't want any more judges on the border, what alarms does that raise in your mind?
Well, the president doesn't want these individuals to have access to legal representation. But in order to prepare an asylum case, you have to have access to legal representation. Folks who are fleeing persecution, they need assistance being able to know what's required in American courts, how to present their story in American court. They need assistance just in reaching out and being able to contact people back home and try to get documentation. And so to deny access to legal representation, which, by the way, is happening already, even before the president came out and say that. I met with 123 men who were shipped to Sheridan Prison in Oregon, and virtually no one had access to legal representation.
That's the voice of Jeff Merkley, Democratic Senator from Oregon, our special guest on episode 75 of The Takeout. I'm Major Garrett. Back in a second.
The president knows that Democrats voted 100% in the Senate for border security. But because he knows that he would lose an honest argument, he creates a fiction.
The Democrats want to protect illegals coming into this country, some of whom are not good, some of whom cause lots of problems in the worst possible way. They want to protect illegals coming into the country much more so than they want to protect you, and that's not where we're coming from.
That's the voice of President Trump, June 25th, West Columbia, South Carolina. Senator Jeff Merkley, Democrat from Oregon, is our special guest here at the Takeout. I'm Major Garrett. We're at Trustees. As you can see on CBSN, Senator Merkley has a Budweiser. I have my, I would just call it the drink of the Viceroy. Figure it out, folks. I'll leave it at that. Respond to the president. Democrats want to protect illegals more than they want to protect non-illegals.
I'll tell you, Democrats voted 100% for extensive border protection, I think it was about $45 billion in strengthening our border back in 2013. That passed with supermajority, Republican support in the Senate, but it was the Republican leadership that killed it in the House. So who really is obstructing doing more extensive border security when it's the Republicans who killed the bill?
You want a wall?
Well, a 4th century wall that doesn't stop people, doesn't stop drug smugglers because they come in through trucks and through tunnels, basically doesn't contribute to security, is called a massive, colossal waste of money. So the bill that the Democrats and Republicans supported in the Senate was about smart investments in border security and also security related to individuals overstaying visas. So that was establishing the rule of law. By the way, more people overstay the visa than come across the border. That was true years ago.
Visa overstays is a much bigger problem.
Much
structural problem.
Much bigger issue. And so essentially it boils down to this. Democrats and Republicans have supported security at the borders. The Republicans torpedoed the bill.
I went to more than 100 Trump events during the campaign. When he talks about the wall, people go nuts. They love it. What does that tell you? And what ought that tell your party about this topic and this issue?
Well, the president spent his campaign dividing Americans against Americans and Americans against this contrived international threat. Think about how, I think of it as the 3 whores strategy of the Republicans. When election comes up, they look for something, immigration, Ebola, ISIS are going to come across in rowboats and attack us on the East Coast, who knows what. And the fact is that Democrats have been strongly there for border security. So the president does what he does in every instance, which is to make things up. That's the polite way of saying he tortures the truth into a big lie. And it's unfortunate. It's very clear now that most of America doesn't believe a thing he says, and that's a result of the fact that virtually everything he says when fact-checked is simply wrong.
The president signed an executive order. Republicans this week tried to pass a comprehensive immigration reform bill, failed spectacularly despite a late White House endorsement. Would you, Senator Merkley, support a narrow piece of legislation on the family separation issue, which would not separate families but allow the federal government to detain them indefinitely?
So this is the internment camp strategy from World War II, where we locked up Japanese Americans. An internment camp, and by the way, if you look at the Ted Cruz bill, which has been the foundation of the Republican conversation, it involves kangaroo courts with no chance for individuals to prepare their case for asylum, and it involves internment camps, Japanese American World War II style. We knew that that was a terrible, dark chapter in America, locking up families. And here's the thing. We had a family case management program that the Inspector General of the Homeland Security did a report on and found that the turnout for hearings of those who went through that case management program was 100%. In other words, every single person in that case management program turned out for their hearing. So we had a strategy of keeping families together, of not damaging children, and they showed up to their hearings. And yet this administration shut that down in June of last year.
And then said people don't show up to their hearings.
But if you don't have case management, if you don't have anybody who speaks the language of the individual, who can tell them when the court dates are, tracks their
Your point,
phones,
because I want my audience to understand, I think the point you're trying to make. If you shut down the mechanisms by which people understand how the hearing process works, they're not going to show up to the hearing.
They won't even know the hearing's taking place.
And then the administration can say, well, they don't show up for their hearing.
That's right.
They're trying to game the system.
Exactly. So we have...
I want to ask you this, because this is a topic that I know our audience has heard, and I want you to address it as directly as you can. The president says you, meaning the Democratic Party, is in favor of open borders. Respond to that charge.
The president knows that Democrats voted 100% in the Senate for border security. But because he knows that he would lose an honest argument, he creates a fiction. And that fiction is to say that Democrats are for open borders. Listen, when I brought attention to this issue of the treatment of children, they unleashed the full force.
They accused you of lying.
President. Oh, they accused me of being responsible for rapists and murderers. It was a long list in every possible way, because they wanted to basically attack me so that nobody else would speak up on behalf of these children who are being abused by administration. Obviously, people didn't believe them, and people started paying attention, and people don't like what's going on.
What's the future of this issue? Because I've talked to lawmakers on Capitol Hill who said, you know what, Trump's probably winning. In 2 weeks, this issue's going to drift away. Nobody's going to care. Yes or no?
I think people are going to keep caring. There is it's in our DNA to treat with respect those fleeing persecution. We have the tools to do it in a completely competent manner, as I was pointing out with the case management program. So there's no excuse to say we are going to mistreat children and their parents in order to send a message to someone overseas.
So when people in my audience see a headline, McConnell agrees to bring Cruz bill to floor, as they might. I don't know if he will or not, but he might. Your point would be that bill can't pass, and you would oppose it, and you would say there's got to be a way to reestablish and reassert this case management process so these people seeking either refugee or asylum status can have a fair shot.
That's right. A bill that reestablishes a case management program, treats people with respect, makes sure they get information in their own language, tracks them, assists them in making sure they show up at their hearings. That's the right way to go. You treat people with respect as they await their asylum hearing.
And let me say this, because we have 20 seconds left. The president wants to treat them as if they're all criminals. That's his language. I'm not putting that in his mouth.
No, you're right. Yeah, no, that's exactly the attitude he has. Treat them horrifically, throw them in prison.
Assuming they're criminals.
And now he wants to throw the children in prison as well in these internment camps.
And to your way of thinking, that has nothing to do with the heritage of America.
This is completely contrary to our values, to treat those fleeing persecution as if they're criminals, treat them with disrespect, injure the children, stress out the adults, damage the families, to send some political message. I mean, you can't do it for any reason, under any religious tradition or moral code.
That's the voice of Jeff Merkley, Democratic Senator from Oregon. Senator Merkley, it's been a pleasure. We're trustees. Thank you for that. Thank you for my great double cheeseburger and everything else.
And I can't believe you ate that whole thing while we were doing this show.
I have many talents,
I've
Senator.
still got half a burger
So
left.
many talents. Only a few of them show up on television, though. See you, folks. This has been The Takeout. We're at Trustees. That's Senator Merkley. He's the eye candy. For those of you watching on CBS, that's right. That's you. The Takeout Outtake Especial. Well, that's next.
It would undoubtedly be either the Eagles or it would be country music.
Eagles or country music?
Yeah.
Both excellent answers.
You're listening to The Takeout.
This is your Tuesday Takeout Outtake Especial. I'm Major Garrett. We're at Trustees. We haven't been here before. It's a great little hamburger joint. Kind of place where you sit down. The tables are a little rustic. Lots of license plates on the walls. Love that. And a phenomenal double cheeseburger. Pepper jack and cheddar. Mine destroyed. Jeff Merkley, Democratic Senator from Oregon, is our special guest. Senator, it's great to have you with us.
It's been very good to be with you.
So this is the fun and games part of our podcast experience. We save this show for Tuesday for our podcast subscribers all over the globe. It's on CBSN because that's a continuous news product. But it's a little bit lighter. It's much less like an interrogation and much more like a conversation. So, one of the things we do in every one of these Takeout Outtake Especials is we ask 3 threshold questions. Our audience loves the answers. So, in no particular order, one of the most or the most influential book in your life, your absolute favorite or one of your favorite movies, and if you're on a long flight or a long drive, what kind of music, artist, or genre are you most likely to listen to?
Well, let's start right there. It would undoubtedly be either the Eagles or it would be country music.
Eagles or country music?
Yeah.
Both excellent answers. I've warmed up. If you don't mind, I'll take host privilege here. There was a time in my life where I couldn't stand the Eagles, even though they came from California as I did. Because Hotel California was played relentlessly on the radio, and it practically made my ears bleed.
Yeah.
And that made me hate almost everything else the Eagles did. And so I had to take like 20 years off for the Eagles. Having taken 20 years off, there's some great lyrics and some tremendous musicianship there.
Absolutely. And so many songs that if you still happen to hear them as you're wandering through a store or playing them at home, they still move the heart.
They're instantly memorable, and the lyrics just flow. So that's great. Book.
A book. Well, boy, there are a lot of powerful books over the course of life. It is... let me just tell you about a book that I've been reading recently. I wouldn't say it's the most powerful one in the course of my life, but a significant one. And that is The Sixth Extinction. And this book is basically about what is happening to our planet right now under the impact of the enormous changes brought about in the last 100 years through human civilization. And we are transforming this planet at an extraordinary pace. And the reason
Dangerously?
At a dangerous pace. The first chapter, if you will, or I don't know if it was the first chapter, one of the early chapters talks about how bat populations around the world are collapsing because of a white nose disease. And then how frog populations are collapsing because of a fungus that has been spread around the world in part with bullfrogs being shipped to be grown for meat in different parts of the world. And as you read it, you just realize that with the enormous magnification of human presence, we are changing the planet in a way that is almost inconceivable. And this is touching on an issue that I always like to raise up in every context, so I finally found a way to do it here in this conversation,
Right.
And that is climate chaos.
Okay.
In my home state, we had fires through the bulk of last summer, covering the state in smoke. And those fires ranged from Montana to California. And we had the 3 hurricanes in the southeast, some $300 billion worth of damage from just those things. Just in the 10 years I've been in the Senate, half the coral reefs in the world have either died or been deeply damaged by warmer, more acidic water. And the list goes on. So we have to be the generation that acts now to do 100% transition to clean and renewable energy.
That's not where this administration is. You know that.
No, this administration
is that a hook for young voters in your estimation?
This kind of takes us back to where we started about how the fossil fuel brothers, the Koch brothers, have taken over the Senate and wiped out, through this kind of this corruption of our government, wiped out all inclinations to be good stewards of our environment.
Okay, movies. Movie or movies?
Oh. Okay, that's rough. I'll tell you the movie I most enjoyed recently, and that was a couple years ago, but I understand there's a sequel coming out, and that was Avatar. Avatar. I first saw it in 3D, and it creates a world that you couldn't have imagined the ability to do this just a few years ago. I mean, the graphics of creating a world that doesn't exist in real life. But it also this movie carries a story about exploitation of resources at the expense of the natural world.
Right. I will give you a counter narrative about that movie, and that is that it is in every way.
You're not going to destroy this movie.
In every way,
for me,
eye-popping. It is an eye-popping movie. It is a visual feast that I thought relied on a highly predictable narrative.
Well. Yes,
I mean,
I can't argue with that.
When that narrative started, to me, I'm like, I know exactly.
You know exactly where it's going. But where's the sequel going to go? That's the question. I'm curious to find out.
Right, and I want to go back to the phrase you used, because you're someone who, by nature and by habit and by profession, has to choose words in an intentional way. You didn't say climate change. You said climate chaos.
Yes. So I deliberately use the word chaos because what we're seeing are extraordinary changes, not just a little bit of a difference. It's not as if we had, in the last 20 years, half plus 2 years that were warmer and the rest were colder than average. No, it's like the 20 warmest years in human history have occurred basically in the last 2 decades plus a couple years. I mean, it's just been an extraordinary surge in temperatures. And you and I are in the first generation of humans to ever live on this planet where we are seeing a massive increase in carbon pollution in the air. And to give you a sense, about the time I was born, and it may be, I'm not sure how old you are, but you might be about the same time.
55.
Okay, well, you have a year on me. So
I always hate that when that happens. I'm older than the guest. It's so depressing.
So the carbon contamination, the background level that had been 270 and risen to about 314 about the time we were born, is just about hit 414, 100-point spread. And I think about the fact that it was back in 1959 that Edward Teller gave a speech to the 100-year anniversary of the petroleum industry and said, you've all got a big problem. That is, when you burn these fossil fuels, it creates a gas that doesn't look like a problem because you can't smell it and you can't see it, but it turns out it traps heat. And that is going to be a big, big challenge for our planet. 1959.
Whether you run for president or not, do you believe this is, because President Obama said this is the defining issue of our immediate future. President Trump said, you're full of it. That's nutty. Do you believe in the end President Obama and those who think like him, as you do, will be proven correct?
Oh, absolutely.
Is there any doubt in your mind about that?
No, I mean, we see the effects everywhere. We have seen a massive change of ice in the Arctic. We see surges in the number of droughts, the number of days over 100 in various locations. I mean, everything points in the same direction, and the direction is damaging. We saw the Syrian war start because of an extensive, extraordinary drought that drove people off the farmland and into the cities.
People forget that.
Yeah, yeah.
A 7-year human catastrophe was at least in part, if not significantly, set in motion by a drought.
Yeah, no, that's right. I was just over in northern Africa, where some 20 million people are on the verge of starvation, and climate chaos is having a lot to do with that.
Jeff Merkley has been our special guest. Senator Merkley, it's been great to meet you, great to spend time with you, great to have a burger with you. I'm Major Garrett. This has been your Tuesday Takeout Outtake Especial. It's because I got the voice in my head. 1 second delay. Nothing better than that, folks. We'll see you next week.